Good evening. Can I ask members to take their seats, please? Hello and good evening. So I'm Councillor Joe Higson. I'm the Chair of the Climate Transition Corporate Environmental Services Climate Policy Advisory Committee, which is a bit of a mouthful. I'm pleased to welcome you to the meeting this evening. So it's going to be broadcast live. Actually, it is already being broadcast live for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording proceedings? Okay, thank you. That's no. Nobody else is recording proceedings. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated. Members of Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. So, moving on to the agenda then. So, item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? No, none? Okay, fantastic. Do we have any substitute members?
Councillor Spooner for Councillor Forecast.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, urgent items. I'm not aware of any urgent items. Is that correct? Okay. Item 4, notification of visiting members. I've seen a few people around, so okay. Okay, if you would like to come up so that we can record. And which items you'd like to speak on.
Councillor Harwood for items 14 and 15.
I'm not entirely sure whether actually the Cabinet members who report to this committee are actually visiting members. If so, all the Cabinet are visiting members. Just a note there. Item 14 and 15.
Councillor Russell, item 14. Thank you.
Councillor Cleater observing tonight.
Councillor Thompson, I may wish to speak to item 14, otherwise I'll simply observe. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5, disclosure disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members or officers? No? Okay, no. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. So are there any disclosures of lobbying? No. Item 7, so we're going to consider whether or not items should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. So I move that all items be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8, minutes of the meeting held, it was a short meeting, but meetings of the minute held on the 21st of May. Are there any comments on the accuracy of these minutes? Okay, so I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of May 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 9, forward plan relating to committee's terms of reference. So this is Councillor Jeffrey.
Forward plan.
Forward plan.
No one else.
Okay, all right. So are there any comments on the forward plan, or do Cabinet members wish to make any comments? So I move that the forward plan be noted. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. So the next item, item 10, the productivity plan, is to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council.
Thank you. So back in April, the Department for Levelling Up, etc., DLUC, wrote to all councils requesting a productivity plan. The deadline for that productivity plan is coming up quite soon. Clearly, there has been a change of government, which I don't know if this will be looked at even, but clearly we were requested to do it by the government, and therefore we have produced it. It's not been done before. It was a fairly new requirement, and formed one of an elements of a range of returns and monitoring carried out by central government to ensure that we have capability and resilience. And some of the information is I think, fairly helpful to us in our own kind of assessment of how we're doing. Appendix 1 in the papers sets out the letter we received and requires us to give information in 4 ways: how we've transformed services, how we're taking advantage of technology, reducing wasteful spend, and barriers to progress. And then Appendix 2 sets out our response. We were limited to 4 pages, and hopefully what we've got here is a useful summary of both the business as usual and specific project work undertaken and how it's aligned to council priorities to ensure sort of best value. It is a snapshot before the last election in May. We're going to be replacing our strategic plan over the coming months anyway, but it is a snapshot and hopefully a useful one. Happy to take feedback and questions. Just to say, the deadline for submission I believe is the 11th of July, so the decision will be coming to me rather than going to Cabinet, so that I can make that decision and get it sent off in time.
Okay, are there any questions? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. This really cheered me up reading this report, and I'd like to congratulate the officers for an excellent report, because to me, this is a snapshot. I think it's more than a snapshot. It just demonstrates how well the Borough Council has been managed. I want to flag that up because we've heard a lot in the papers about councils throughout the country going to the wall and haven't been badly managed and all this kind of thing. But throughout, this Borough Council has really done its residents proud in terms of financial management. And I think that there are some, in fact, all the points that are raised here, I would actually throw at the government and say, look, if you ran your government or our country like a lot of us borough councils run our councils, it's not just us, a lot of other councils have equally good principles, then perhaps the state of the nation might not be as sad as it currently is. So I think this is really a good paper, and I thoroughly support it being sent to government. The trouble is, as Councillor Jeffrey so rightly points out, it might just get thrown out the window as soon as it hits the carpet. So I'm wondering, I assume they have got carpets at number 10, not spent their money on anything else. I'm assuming that perhaps we could put in the covering letter something like, please don't disregard this, please take this, this applies to any incoming government. I have to say this, because it's all been put so eloquently, I wouldn't dream of suggesting what wording to put, but I do think it's worth saying, hey, look, don't disregard this, because I wouldn't mind betting that there are quite a few other borough councils, district councils, who are also well run, might well be reflecting similar kinds of principles here. So I don't think this should be dismissed at all by any government whatsoever. So I would like to say, can we add to the recommendation, well done to the officers, please? I would like that added to the recommendation. If this committee is happy to, support this report, I think the officers should be thanked for a first-class reflection of our modus operandi, which I hope would continue, as I say, regardless of which party is in control. We all want good management, don't we? We all want the best of our residents. We all want efficient working. I'm sorry to go off on one, but when you think what we've... Yeah, I won't go on anymore, otherwise we could be here all night. I think I've made my point. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? No, so the recommendation is that the response to the request for the productivity plan be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 11. So Maidstone House and the link decarbonisation. So this is going to be introduced by Councillor Summerskill. Thank you.
Thank you. Background to this item is that it's the Council's Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan had a commitment to decarbonising our own buildings, and a successful bid was made last year for 3.126 million from the government's public sector decarbonisation scheme for a number of measures at Maidstone House and the link, which included air source heat pumps to replace the gas boilers, new insulation and glazing, installation of solar PV panels, and a separate funding bid of 300,000 to the South East Local Enterprise Partnership to refit the 4th floor, and that was also successful. This report updates members on progress with the project and sets out updated costs for Cabinet approval. The bid was based on an initial estimate of project costs of 3.775 million. Calford Seedon, who are a multidisciplinary property and construction consultancy, were commissioned to carry out project management and a range of professional services, and with their more detailed work, they've now given a figure of 5.32 million for the works, of which it's considered prudent to add a 10% contingency. This increased budget is due to changes in material specification and costs, and is based on more detailed technical advice now that we've looked at this with the consultants. External funding will still provide over 50% of the total project costs, and the Maidstone element can be covered from within the capital programme that was agreed by Council in February 2024. It's anticipated that the main contract will be let in October 2024, pending planning approval, which is also required. We hope to obtain that from the Planning Committee. So our recommendations are to approve the updated project budget for the project and approve the 4th floor refit works funded by CLEP, and receive further reports as the project progresses, and delegate authority to the Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement to select and appoint contractors for these services as necessary.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Do we have any questions or comments? No? Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. I saw there's a very generous grant for this project. In terms of do we have to deliver the project by a certain period for that grant to remain in place, or is it safe for the whole sort of period? If you could let me know, that'd be great.
Yes, we have to, for the grant, that has to be spent by the end of March 2025. But that doesn't mean the project has to be completed by then, but that 3.1 million element needs to be spent by then.
Councillor Goodge.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really good to see this report come to committee, to the advisory committee, because we've been talking about this sort of thing for what felt like ages, and I felt as if we'd never get there, and we've actually got here. So I'm really pleased to see this. Having said that, I'm feeling it's a bit of a curate's egg, because I do feel as I just need a bit of encouragement. This extra money that we've got to put in because of the rising costs, which of course I understand, is it in the budget? Just reassure me that we can afford to do this and it's already budgeted for in this coming year's budget, because I'm feeling a bit nervous. Could you just do that for me, please?
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Yes, it is in the capital budget for next year.
Thank you. May I ask another question, please, Chairman? The next steps, as outlined on page 28, they will need to be moved forward, won't they? Are you going to do that, by 3 months, or have I misread it?
Sorry, which part of the project?
I'm looking on page 28, and it's the timetable for the project. And the detailed design stage was in May 24. And I'm just wondering, does that whole timetable need to be moved forward, or is it still relevant and still true?
It's in terms of the detailed design, that's still ongoing. So we're into July now, so it's a little bit over our initial deadline. But with the we're also still up in the air in terms of when the contractors will come on board, so that needs to be updated. But the overall timetable is what we're hoping and aiming for, yeah.
Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. It's relevant to this item and a few other items this evening. When we work out the sort of carbon saving for these solar panels, are we considering like their disposal when they get to the end of their life? Has that been calculated into the various sort of savings that are mentioned throughout this evening for solar panels?
It's a good point. So when we find the contractor, part of the total costs of maintaining them and disposing of them is meant to be one of the things that the contractor talks about and gives their life cycle. So we can make sure that that's part of our contract when we find a contractor to get those PV. But yeah, I can report that back if it's of interest.
Are there any other comments or questions? No? Okay, there are 4 recommendations. So the Cabinet is recommended, number 1, to approve capital expenditure of 5.85 million to the decarbonisation project, comprising SALIX grant funding of 3.13 million and a council contribution of 2.72 million. Is that agreed? Thank you. Number 2, to approve £300,000 to complete the 4th floor refit works funded by the South East Local Enterprise Partnership. Is that agreed? Thank you. Number 3, to receive further reports as the project progresses. Is that agreed? Thank you. And number 4, to delegate authority to the Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement to select and appoint contractors for applicable services as necessary. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So item number 12, this is Quarter Finance Performance and Risk Monitoring Report. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report, 4th quarter, is as at March 2024 and effectively covers the full year position of the 23-24 period. In that period, there were 4 PACs, policy advisory committees. There are now 3 with different areas of responsibility. For convenience, this report covers the areas for which the new PACs are responsible and effectively reports performance as though those PACs and the allocations have been in effect for the last year. Main points to call out: we were within budget in the last financial year, but there are some overspends in some areas, and there's definitely some overs and unders. So the difference between the over and underspend is an underspend of just 22,000, which is 0.01% of the overall budget. Most notably, the overspends were attributed to temporary accommodation, but that was offset by a drawdown of the contingency budget and other interest and additional income due to us holding more money than we expected on deposit and interest rates being higher than we'd anticipated. As such, there's no budget as yet for this financial year. Focus will be on both the corporate strategy review and also setting of the medium-term financial strategy, which we'll talk later in the agenda. So capital expenditure has lagged behind projections, and that's mainly because of the council's house building programme. Any unspent budget will be carried forward and utilised in 24-25. The report that you have also deals with council tax and business rates collection and reserves and treasury management. On reserves, these remain comfortable but not at excessive levels, and we will talk about sort of like risks as we go through, particularly in the MTFS paper. Total borrowing amounts to 45 million, and most of that borrowing is still to be deployed for capital investment, which again housing related, which leaves 33 million, which we're currently holding in the form of short-term investments. In terms of performance indicators, these are set out in page 60, from page 66 onwards. Part A shows the position for the quarter 4, January to March 24. Part B shows the year as a whole, and explanations for underperformance are given in the report, but they're effectively focused on litter collection, bins and waste management. Moving on to UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So in year 1, 23-24, we were awarded almost 300,000 underneath the scheme, and then through to year 3, when the amount has been 740,000. That's largely been used towards town centre, arts, heritage, green space, and Shaun the Sheep, which I hope everyone is enjoying. The detail of that, the amounts funded and the amounts deployed, are set out on page 73, Appendix 3. Business rates, there on page 77, Appendix 4, there is a recommendation that 2 debts for outstanding business rates be written off. For these, all collection recovery actions and legal efforts have been carried out, and so they're considered end of life, as it were. And risks, finally, corporate risks, and a summary of these are included in the corporate risk register. The summary on page 81, detail on pages 85 to 96. Our requests to the committee are that you are recommended to note the various contents of the report and to recommend to the Cabinet that it writes off business rates set out in Appendix for the 2 cases. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Cannon.
On page 51, it mentions that the budgets for the business rates for the park and ride are to be removed. And I was just wondering, because we've got Liberal Democrats and the Greens in charge of the council now, and they campaigned for the park and ride. So I was just wondering, should that be in there, considering the sort of administration that's now in charge? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon.
Short answer is this was a report from quarter 4. We will be working through the new plan for the coming year, and the budget will be amended as appropriate. I'll be making an announcement next week, I believe.
Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I see on page 96, I was looking at the risks there, on the waste and recycling contract, which incidentally I thought was very carefully worded in our letter of response to the government. But anyway, be that as it may, penalty clauses within contract can be deployed. So I've just realised, as Councillor Jeffries just said, this was to the end of Q4. So we're out of time. I was going to say, have we done it yet? But it's not appropriate, is it? Because this is to the end of Q4. Sorry, yeah, I lost the plot. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
Yes, so the contract penalties will be kicked in a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago, end of June. So yes, that was a forward look in terms of potential mitigations at that point. Clearly, the contract's in full flow now in terms of its levers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? So for this item, there are 6 recommendations on page 31. So the recommendations are: number 1, that the revenue position at the end of the Q4 for 2023-24, including the actions being taken or proposed to improve the position where significant variants have been identified, be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. Number 2, that the capital position at the end of Q4 for 2023-24 be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. And number 3, that the performance position as at Q4 for 2023-24, including the actions being taken or proposed to improve the position where significant issues have been identified, be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. Number 4, that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund update attached as Appendix 3 be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. That the uncollectible business rates, the NNDR, listed in Appendix 4, be approved for write-off by Cabinet. Is that agreed? Thank you. Number 6, that the risk update attached as Appendix 5 be noted. Okay, thank you. So, item agenda 13. So, solar energy investment projects. So, this is going to be introduced by Councillor Summerskill.
Thank you, Chair. This item is, unlike the others, is new to Cabinet. The report outlines 3 solar voltaic investment projects aimed at supporting the Council's goal of achieving net zero by 2030. The projects are at the Lock Meadow Entertainment Complex, the Parkwood Depot and the Moat Park Leisure Centre area. Collectively, the projects represent a total potential investment of £960,000, but the combined solar PV capacity of these installations has the potential to offset 108 tonnes of carbon dioxide emittance annually, and they offer a significant financial benefit with an annual savings of £110,000 and a payback between 5 and 10 years, depending on which project you're looking at, an average of 7.6 years to pay back. The plan and details for each location are shown on pages 103 to 105. An additional benefit of doing this was improved energy security for the Council's operations in those buildings as well. The report is asking to invest in all 3, or any 1, 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. As mentioned earlier, the carbon savings that are mentioned in this report don't include the disposal at the end of the life of the solar panels. Is that correct?
Yeah, the same as before. It'll be something that we can discuss with the contractor. Generally, most components are recyclable, and so we can make sure that that's highlighted in the contract.
Yeah, just because, to come back on that, because it is quite significant, because we are suggesting that solar panels are creating a carbon saving, but then we're not actually considering their disposal when they reach the end of their life. So it's quite a significant point that should be considered when we're putting these reports together, in my opinion. I think also, I'd also add to this that I personally don't support the Moat Park project. That looks quite, I mean, I know the area where, well, one, I'd like to see what that looks like from the ground, because we're provided on page 105 aerial views, but Moat Park, I'd like to understand what that looks like visually from the side. So when in the recommendations where it says more information, that's sort of where I'm leading to on that point, because I'd want to see what it looked like actually from the park point of view. I've seen similar bays in Spain, and they also can encourage antisocial behaviour. Now, that may not be the case, but I would like to understand whether that's being considered. And also where the solar panels are in Moat Park, there's some lovely trees all around them, so I really have concerns about their effectiveness versus the cost of them. So from my point of view, depending on hearing other comments in the committee, I wouldn't want to see the Moat Park project carried on until further information's been gathered and we understand a bit more about the visual impact, and we've had some more considerations on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give the officers a chance to respond to that.
Just in terms of the visual impact, it's a grade listed park, so we've already sought pre-planning application just to get a sense of what would be required to comply with that. So you're right, we would have to keep the canopy level of the solar not above the trees and not below the trees, so it can't be seen as you're approaching from the hill, and so that has been taken into consideration, and we'd have to comply with that to go ahead. And the same with the trees. The trees are part of a longer standing planning permission, so we wouldn't be able to disrupt the trees or cut anything down to put them in. So there are difficulties around all that, but I can find more information and bring that back to Cabinet if that's the decision.
Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I may have missed it in the report somewhere. Are the roofs all capable of taking the weight of the PVs? I just need that reassurance, please. Thank you.
Yes, we've learned the hard way with the leisure centre to double check the roof weight allowances. So yeah, we've using the structural the building's structural loads that when the building was built, but we're also getting a structural engineer to double check before we put anything on the roof.
If I may, Chairman, please. Thank you, but funnily enough, I've learned just recently that there are ways of overcoming that problem. In case it isn't load-bearing, they can slightly change, depending on the roof, of course, but it may not be the end of the world. But at least I've had your assurance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, so there's a recommendation on page 99, and there are three parts to this. But it's to invest in solar photovoltaic projects as outlined in the report 4, and then we're going to go through each one, particularly because the third one might be problematic. So the first one, Lock Meadow Entertainment Complex, is that agreed? Thank you. Parkwood Depot. Thank you. And Moat Park and the Leisure Centre. Okay. All right. So can we note that Councillor Cannon is not happy with that? Thank you. Right. So item 14: allocation of council land and biodiversity net gain off-site provision. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Summergill again, and I know that we have visiting members that want to talk on this topic.
Thank you, Chair. Biodiversity net gain, as we know, has come in at the start of this year as a concept brought in by the previous government. The BNG off-site market is a strategic opportunity for the Council to generate income and support local nature recovery strategies, and to facilitate other development meeting its environmental obligations. By selling biodiversity units from council-owned land to developers who require off-site BNG, the planning process could be streamlined and local biodiversity could be enhanced. Officers have identified 2 council-owned sites as potential off-site BNG providers, one in Ulcombe and one near Hawkenbury. Ecological assessments by Kent Wildlife Trust have estimated a combined uplift of 13+ habitat units across these sites through effective landscaping and management plans. The potential value of these is an annual income of £13,000 for the council over DEFRA's 30-year requirement if all the units are sold to developers, hence a potential value of £390,000. Now this is allocating suitable council land holdings for off-site BNG could generate income to maintain these sites and support local nature recovery. This is a market testing opportunity because BNG is new to the market. It's an off-site market that is still being developed. Other people, landowners, are also using it as well. So we're asking the PAC to recommend to Cabinet the allocation of these 2 council-owned sites for local BNG off-site provision, and to delegate responsibility to the Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement to agree terms for any disposal of units, PNG units, from within the 2 sites in consultation with myself.
Thank you, Councillor Summersgill. Okay, so can I bring up Councillor Harwood as a visiting member to speak?
Right, good evening, Chairman, colleagues. The planning aspects of biodiversity net gain actually sit within the planning policy and management portfolio, so I think it's worthwhile me just putting perhaps some of my concerns that I have about the current report in place, and they may well be addressed by the Cabinet member or officers. However, I am concerned that of all of the land holdings that Maidstone Borough Council owns, these are 2 of the most biodiverse. Their sites, both the Kingswood site and the site at Hawkenbury, I know them very well, and they have quite a rich flora and fauna and ecology, and they are by no means a blank canvas site where you could go in with creative land management. If you change the management, you will change the biodiversity, and you may lose as much as you gain. And I think there are some real question marks over what kind of interventions are required. However, I think my key concern is a very practical one, that we all know that we're in the midst of a nature crisis, and that the UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in the whole world, and that England is and southeast England is particularly in the crosshairs. And I am concerned that if we are selling units off of these biodiverse sites, we could get a developer buying the units, developing the site they want to develop for their housing or whatever, which may have woodland on or some other habitat. And the offsetting is off the back of a site that is already biodiverse. So actually there is no additionality, which I think is the phrase that government promotes, because so essentially you're losing one site, but you're not actually kind of gaining anything on our site. I think there are real opportunities for Maidstone. I think if you look at our land portfolio, we've got lots and lots of land which could be really significantly improved for biodiversity. There's one site in Boxley Ward off Old Chatham Road, which which I've raised with the officers, which was very biodiverse. The current land management has damaged that biodiversity value. There are other sites, Dove Hill, for example, again in Boxley, which is largely been replanted, ancient woodland being largely replanted with sweet chestnut, where we could return it to natural tree species. But we're not proposing those sites where we can make gains. We're proposing sites that are already biodiverse. So if we are just kind of testing the water, I think that's fair enough. But I think that we at some point need to go through the list of our land holdings, and actually it's quite a long list. It runs to about 3 pages, but the sites in all of our wards, there's one, for example, close to your patch up by Mangravet Wood, some of the land up between Mangravet and the cemetery, which, not the sports pitches area, but some of the other areas where there's some real opportunity to enhance biodiversity, and there's potential maybe down the line of actually kind of buying some blank canvas sites and then recouping some of the costs through selling units on the site. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think I would just want Maidstone to really engage proactively with it and positively with it, so that we do make genuine gains for wildlife and for landscape, and we help to pay for it by the units that we sell. But I just want my slight concerns around the 2 sites that have already been identified to be assuaged. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Councillor Russell to come and speak? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, colleagues. A couple of points that I wanted to make on this report. Firstly, the wards affected are Headcorn and Sutton Valence. I've spoken to my members that represent those wards, and they're not aware of these items in this report. Now, I'm not sure how any of us would feel if there were things potentially going on in our wards that we hadn't been made aware of. I think for anything that's a council project, any ward member should be included from the offset. That just goes without saying. So I wonder if that could be noted. I've sat in planning committee where we've discussed some housing at Lenham, and the application was going through, and the developer put forward that they would offset their net biodiversity gain requirements, and everyone said, oh no, we don't want them to do that. We'd really want them to provide that net biodiversity gain on that site. And we went round and round, and section 106, and the committee were really unhappy about that. And I think, taking on board some of Councillor Harwood's points, we should really be striving to achieve the net biodiversity gain on the sites that has the development, rather than providing a bit of an easy get out that might be abused in some way. So the final thing I'd probably like to say is that this report is 4 pages long. This is a commitment that spans 30 years. I can't see any costs here for management of these sites going forwards. I mean, really, if you have land and you're looking at what you want to do with your land, I would expect that you would have a full business case for what would be the best way forward for that land. And is it this, or is it other uses? And, Councillor Harwood mentioned loads of other sites. So I would want that to be evaluated alongside the other council holdings. But I think I'm not really sure how the committee can make a full decision based on 4 pieces of paper that really doesn't have very many costs listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor English.
Thank you very much. It's quite clear that the biodiversity net gain position does actually give the council an opportunity, and it is true that we need to develop the argument substantially. I share some of Councillor Harwood's concerns because I know these two sites quite well, and if I was looking for sites to enhance the biodiversity, I wouldn't be starting here. I'd be starting at, for example, some of the sites in High Street Ward, which are basically mown grass, and they've got the biodiversity of a completely sterile piece of concrete. The only living form on them is overly pesticised grass. Similarly, there's a large number of arable fields around which have no development value, but equally very little ecological value. Having said that, we've got to start somewhere. Subject to the proper use of the second recommendation on the papers, that the delegation to take these sites forward is exercised in consultation with the cabinet members, so we actually do make sure that we get an actual biodiversity gain on these sites and we're not undermining the biodiversity that already exists, which hopefully the cabinet member will be in the position to do with recommendation 2. I'm happy to let those go forward, but what I would hope that we would be doing, and I hope the committee's support, is looking through our entire stock of land and seeing that we can introduce biodiversity net gain on a number of sites which, frankly, we own, but are mown to within an inch of their lives, and very little lives on, and also that we can look around the borough for opportunities to actually buy to invest, because don't be wrong about this. This is a significantly growing financial opportunity for the council if it's managed properly. And yes, it mustn't undermine landscaping and biodiversity net gain on site where developments take place, because that is a very significant thing that we should always have. And this should not be seen as a substitute for proper landscaping and biodiversity conditions on site for planning applications. That point is well made by Councillor Russell. We shouldn't be seeing it as a substitute for getting the developments right, but it does give us an investment opportunity. I'd hope that we would have the support, Councillor Harwood and I would have the support of the committee for asking for a wider report to be brought forward looking at our land holdings with a particular emphasis on those sites that are not currently biodiverse, and seeing this as a starting point. That might be a third recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Does Councillor Thompson want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome the comments of all members who've spoken recently, and indeed I share Councillor Russell's alarm that ward members may have been omitted in consultations on this proposal. That is clearly not the situation that we need to see going forward. It seems to me, in the light of comments made on the previous item, that it is desperately important that all members of this committee and those advising it are fully brought up to speed on the training for biodiversity, biodiversity net gain, climate change action and such like, in order that we're able to make proper judgments about these issues. I note that at least 2 councillors have spoken today about the use and usefulness of the financial aspects of this proposal. It will be tragic if the judgments that we are brought to are only considered in financial terms. We do not yet know how it is that we're going to be able to measure biodiversity net gains, including the maintenance of existing biodiversity at this time. It is a moving process. I welcome the critical comments of councillors on my left this evening asking questions about other parts of these processes. We need to get better at this, and we will do so if we proceed in good faith, and I thank all members for their willingness to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments and questions from the committee members? Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I find myself broadly in agreement with most of what's been said so far this evening. I feel strongly that ward members and parish councils need to be very much involved with this entire exercise. I think we need to look carefully at all borough council owned sites, and I think some of them could play a vital role in biodiversity net gain. My serious concern, though, is with the logistics of how it is going to be implemented. The priority must surely be for biodiversity net gain on site when we deal with fresh applications. I think that is vital. If developers just think, well, it's a way of enhancing our development value of our site and get the bugs and bunnies off to somewhere else, I mean, I think they should be given very, very short shrift. We could end up with some parts of the urban areas of the borough with no biodiversity at all if they think they can just show it off somewhere else. I think we need to look at every case on its individual merits and be aware that every bit of biodiversity net gain that we put on our site is allowing the developer to make extra profits out of his site. So I think we need to look at every single site on a one-for-one basis, and I think we need to set up some sort of policy guidance for how we'll go about that. But at the moment, I think the principle is potentially very sound, but I think a lot more work needs to go into it, especially the logistics of how it is to be implemented through the planning system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carnard.
What happens to these sites after the 30-year period, please?
That's the end of the DEFRA contract period, so they can revert, and it depends on local council's decisions in 30 years' time as to what to do with the sites then.
So just so I understand, because we're using the term sale in the document a lot, we're actually not selling, they retain under council ownership, and 30 years' time will be up to the local council with any future plans of what to do.
These are council-owned sites already, and so developers would enter the market, make an agreement for the entire 30-year period. They can pay up front, they can pay each year over the time. It's looking at the moment as if developers would probably prefer to see the benefits and pay as it's going ahead. But that contract would be in place for 30 years, and then when that uplift has been guaranteed over that 30-year period, then the developers' financial inputs would stop, and we could sell more, or we could revert the land or change the usage.
Are there any other comments? Or Councillor Cannon first. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. When I first read this report, I thought, oh, this is great. This is really, really good. And then I thought, hang on a minute. Why these two sites? Where have they come from? I wonder if they asked the councillors. And I was really impressed by what my fellow councillors have said this evening. So my concerns have grown rather than just being focused on why these two sites. And I'm almost tempted to suggest that the report be withdrawn, actually. We're effectively looking at option 4, request further information. I think we should be doing that. And I think it was Councillor English that spoke very eloquently. You were looking at all sites, and there was something that you tagged on the end, and I'm sorry it's gone out of my head, but it was very good, whatever you said. That's what I'm saying. Thanks, Chairman.
Councillor Cannon, do you want to speak?
I would back Councillor Gooch's point on option 4, because if that was a proposal, I'd second it, because I do feel, as Councillor Russell highlighted, that we should understand the cost of running this. You know, in principle, it sounds great, but what is there some costs to the council going forward? So I think we do need to understand that before we make a decision.
So on option 4, which is the request for further information, we have a proposer and a seconder. So before the vote. To respond. Okay. All right.
Sorry, I was going to respond to some of the visiting members' questions. Just in background, I'm a chartered water and environmental manager, and I've worked with biodiversity net gain assessments for 3 or 4 years. So my view of this will be coloured by the fact that I have been involved in assessing sites on this side, but not on the net gain selling on. I would note that these are testing, is a trial testing these sites, and we have had discussions with Council Harwood before about other sites that are around and within the Maidstone area. And also, it is not restricted to planning applications from Maidstone. This is what will be particularly interesting is central urban developers who have no scope to do biodiversity net gain on urban sites will be looking all over the country to offset their urban developments. It's not other ones in Maidstone that we're holding this out to, it will be holding out to the whole market.
Can I just also add, in terms of the uplift, I think that the project absolutely aims to improve the biodiversity on these sites, but the other aspect of this is that there's a protection on these sites as well. So if we look to go ahead, it means that these sites have part of a register. They would be on the market for developers to look at, and if developers chose to purchase those units, there's a DEFRA clause that comes into effect, and that means that these sites would then be protected, and the costs that come from the developers would be what we need to maintain the sites. So the costs would only come if those units are sold, and then that maintenance would start. And the way we're looking at it at the moment is in tandem with Kent Wildlife Trust, who have the officers and can monitor these sites and ensure the uplift over a longer period of time. So there's that aspect. And then just to build on what Councillor Summergill said, we're next to London, and so there's part of the business case is also that very dense urban areas such as London will be looking outside. They possibly can't get their 10% uplift on site, and so there's a potential market just because we're near to London that developers from London will be looking here as well. So to get these registered would just be getting the ball rolling. But I hear what the councillors say in terms of looking at other sites and finding more areas of uplift.
Councillor Gooch.
Thank you very much. I hear what you say, and I still think it's fantastic. It really is. But we've got to have some kind of planning policy to protect us if it goes pear-shaped. It's a wonderful concept, but to me, that's what it is at the moment. And I get exactly what you say, because I think you referred to it in the report about us being close to London. You know, they're desperate for land to try and to make up for what they can't put on their own sites. I'm with you all the way, but we've got to approach this in the right way. Let's look at all our sites. Let's get some policy cracking. So I still stick by my suggestion, my recommendation, that the report be withdrawn, and we need further information and guidance with planning policy. Let's do this properly, and who knows, we could be the leaders. This borough could be the way forward for other districts to follow. Don't let's lose that opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Summergill said. I mean, shouldn't we really be using this for biodiversity gain in Maidstone and not just letting London? We shouldn't be, personally, that sounds a bit odd, and it would be, again, something I think we should get more information on, because I don't understand why we would want to not try and make our borough get the benefits for our borough, in the sense of not help some developer in London get biodiversity gain.
Thank you. Councillor English.
It would be helping our borough if a particular site were made biodiverse, wherever the funding comes from. That's a particular point. It would be helping our borough, and it would also be financially. I do take the point about the planning policy point, but the planning policy point can't be addressed through the biodiversity net gain policy. It has to be the other way round. One sets the planning policies of the council, and the biodiversity net gain provision then fits into it. One cannot write the planning policy through the biodiversity net gain policy. It's the wrong way round. The two things do dovetail, but it has to be done the other way round. At just that point. What I was asking for was, I don't think the report needs necessarily to be withdrawn, but what I would like to see personally, and I am speaking personally here, is a recommendation that the market testing go ahead and these recommendations, but a further report is brought back to this committee on the potential for other sites within council ownership and more details on how the scheme is actually to be managed, monitored, both in a financial sense and on its impact on the Borough Council's biodiversity overall. And I would just like to suggest that the committee might want to recommend we do that as a third recommendation.
Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I just want to say I understand the benefits of biodiversity net gain, but I do concur with Councillor English. And the other thing I would like to understand is, how did these two sites come about when there are so many other sites, it would seem, that would be more preferable than these two?
That's a good question. So we shortlisted about 6 different sites, and because there was already good biodiversity on these sites, it was seen as having a good baseline, and we would try to improve upon that and show that could be done and value those units on top of that. So at least, yeah, we wouldn't be potentially making the site worse. The idea was to have a site that already had a strong baseline. But I've heard the councillors. I think there are other opportunity sites and a longer-term business plan in terms of how this money gets directed into this site to maintain it, but also looking at other potential purchases of sites or other cheap agricultural land that can't be used or things like that we could look at doing other uplift.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so there was a motion, which what?
I was just about to ask Councillor Cannon how do you feel about accepting Councillor English's slight amendment? Because I think, Clive, if I may, Chairman, I think you say it more eloquently than I have. So how do you feel?
I think it was sensible.
Yeah.
Can you propose the motion, please?
Do I need to clarify? I knew it'd come to me in the end. Now, I was going to suggest that Councillor English expanded quite eloquently on I was going to say withdraw the report, but Clive, you said that you'd rather keep the report there, but ask for further information. Can you help us out here,
Could
please?
clarify, what I was asking for was that the 2 points here be agreed, but that a third point be added, that a full report be brought back on to this committee at the earliest opportunity on the potential for the range of sites within Borough, the Borough Council's ownership, and the way that the management of these sites, including these two, would be structured going forward.
Okay,
and the overlap with planning policy.
Okay. So that's an expanded report. It's a big report which has more areas and explores more areas.
Sorry, I'm a tad confused. So I agree. So we're requesting further information. So option 4 in an expanded report. That's your.
I'm sorry, I mustn't keep necessarily suggesting option 4. What I was suggesting was that the first 2 recommendations be agreed, but the third option be added. A third section be added, requesting a fuller report in the terms that I've set out, because I think that would meet the committee's concerns.
If I can, I think the proposal needs to come from the committee, not from a cabinet member, and I feel like we're treading a fine line here.
Yeah, agreed. Can we have a proposal and seconder for the committee, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the proposal is, my personal view is to not go for options 1 or 2 or 3, but to go for option 4, and to say that we require much further information about all the potential sites available within the borough, which must be identified in consultation with ward members and parish councils, and that we need much more information about the logistics of how they will operate and what we will charge the developers for making use of our land, whether that be a one-off payment or whether that be a annual rental. I think that all, and how we assess that value. I think these are all critical issues that need to be addressed.
There are quite a few issues here that we're expecting to see. We just need a wider report that encompasses. It's the management, it's the monitoring, it's all our properties. Have they been assessed? Have they been looked at? Who's been consulted? I think that's why we're struggling here a bit, because this report, in its essence, is very, very good, but it's very, very thin, and it hasn't gone deep enough. And I think that's why we're struggling to make sense of a decent recommendation, quite frankly.
Okay, is that seconded?
Oh, whatever it is, I'll second. Did I propose? You proposed getting in a muddle now.
Okay, so the proposal is for number 4, which is request for further information that explores more sites and is much more detailed.
Exploring, market testing, the potential for the sites, monitoring and management. It's a much wider remit, and I thought it would be for officers to try to widen the remit. We're suggesting what we're expecting to see in the report.
Yeah, okay.
But is that enough for the written report and the recommendation?
Okay, so
not, Anna?
Shall we take that to a vote then?
Right.
So for the proposal, which is to ask for more information, can I have a show of hands, please?
Keep it short, yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, the motion is carried. And against, please. 1. Abstentions?
I'm not abstaining.
None. Okay, thank you. So the motion is carried. Okay, we'll get there in the end. Right. Item 15. So, natural flood management schemes. This is going to be introduced again by Councillor Summersgill. We also have visiting members that have requested to speak on this issue.
Thank you, Chair. Council set aside money in its capital programme for schemes to reduce flood risk and increase resilience under the heading Flood Action Plan. It's become clear that large-scale infrastructure projects are inappropriate in the areas to the south of Maidstone Borough that are most affected by flooding. Accordingly, the Flood Action Plan has focused on smaller-scale schemes, and natural flood management schemes have a twofold benefit of increasing flood resilience and supporting biodiversity and the climate change agenda. This approach was supported by a review of the water management cycle undertaken by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee last year. This proposal is necessary in the first stage to deliver an NFM scheme and to investigate schemes and establish their feasibility and carry out the necessary design work. The Council has already funded the South East Rivers Trust to deliver NFM schemes, and this proposal is for the Council to provide £57,000 for the South East Rivers Trust to carry out further feasibility and design work. Details are set out on page 127. In line with a request from the previous Cabinet that any MBC funding be matched from external sources, the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board has agreed to provide £72,000 for delivery of the schemes identified by us in the feasibility and design stage. So the report includes a recommendation that an agreement be drawn up with the South East Rivers Trust and the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board to cover the terms of the funding. The location of the site that we've been looking at is on the River Sherway, which is in Headcord and Sutton Valence Ward, and they've already started developing relationships with landowners along this river. And if successful, and the approach here could be applied to other areas that are vulnerable to flooding.
Thank you, Councillor. So, visiting member, Councillor Harwood, please.
Right, thank you. I'm in full agreement with the project with South East Rivers Trust. However, I think there should potentially be an additional reference here to those schemes that can be carried out through opportunity. And just to kind of reflect that, sometimes they can cost nothing. And perhaps the biggest natural flood management win in Maidstone Borough was achieved just on the eastern edge of Maidstone Town Centre and did not cost anything. And that was the stretch of land essentially from the Wat Tyler Way Bridge through to Moat Park along the River Len, which was negotiated as part of a planning application by Mr. Jarman and by certain members. And that site historically was covered in tarmac and concrete. It was covered in old dumped abandoned cars and car parts and rubbish. Back in the year 2000, there was very significant flooding in Maidstone, and the worst flooding in terms of property damage to commercial premises and to residential places like Bishop's Way and so on was not from the River Medway. It was actually from the River Len, which is culverted through much of the central part of the town centre. And that issue was all sorts of problems because of the way that river was treated. In 2001-2002, that piece of land was negotiated from a private owner, and successively all of the concrete and the tarmac was removed, the old car hulks were removed, the fly tipping was removed, and the land was essentially re-wetted, so it's turned back to woodland and wetland and marshland, and its hydraulic roughness was increased, so instead of being just a surface that water scudded off, it became a big sponge. And a few years later, in 2013, we had flooding of a similar scale to the year 2000, and not only did we not have one single property in Maidstone flooded from the River Len, they were actually able to overpump from the at-risk Lewes stream through the Woolly Road surface drainage setup into the River Len, and it stopped. So the River Len not only did not flood Maidstone under a flood of equal proportions, it also saved Lewes and Tovel from flooding as well. And I think that just shows how significant the gains can be if you do renaturalise the corridors of wetland areas and so on. So all power to the elbow of this project, But I think all of us as members and all officers should always be on the lookout of ways that we can enhance our catchments and enhance our floodplains, and that might be through biodiversity net gain, returning the wetlands that have been drained. It might be through different routes, but I just wanted to make a plea that we just added another recommendation on here, that all opportunities through all routes should be grasped with both hands wherever they arise, because they can be very cost effective and they can have huge benefits for our residents and for our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Russell, please. Okay. Councillor Thompson? No? Okay, I'd like to invite questions or comments from the committee, please. Oh, Councillor English?
I would have spoken to this if I was still a visiting member. All I would say is that, as you can see from the report, the original proposition came forward from the all-party project on the water cycle, and it's good to see it coming through in this form. I do support the recommendation on the papers. I think it's a good report. It's a good starting point. But as Councillor Harwood said, and I'm sure all of us, I hope all of us anyway, would see this as a starting point. I'm not going to recommend to the committee how you take this forward, but I would hope there would be an ambition in this committee to see further work done, further reports and opportunities taken. I'm sure it's up to you how you want to take that forward, or not, as the case may be. But I share Councillor Harwood's ambition that this be a starting point, and I would hope that you as a committee would want to spur us on as a council to do more in this area.
Thank you, Councillor English. Any comments or questions from the committee members, please? Councillor Conrad.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose option 1, but with an amendment that, where appropriate, further opportunities are investigated, as per Councillor Harwood's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Conrad. So the amendment is to the £57,000 allocated. Yeah, okay. So do you want to propose a motion?
The motion would be identical to option 1 with the additional sentence that, as appropriate, other options are investigated over time. Just making sure that it goes... Sorry, the option is as per option 1, but with an additional sentence that, as appropriate, other measures are considered over time. Basically following the comments from Councillor Harwood.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Okay, can we have votes for that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. That's a full house. Thank you. So, are there any other comments from the councillors, from the committee members? No? Recommendations. Right. So the other recommendations then are that the authority be delegated to the Director of Finance, Resources and Business Improvement in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery to conclude agreement on terms for disbursement of the funding with the South East Rivers Trust and the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board. Is that agreed? Thank you. And the third one is that a review of the outcomes of the proposed work be reported to Cabinet within 12 months. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, item 16, corporate planning timetable, and I'd like to introduce Councillor Jeffrey, please.
Thank you. this is a little bit drier than the last few reports, and is probably slightly nebulous given where we are in the cycle of things. The council has, as part of its corporate planning and internal processes, requires a strategic plan. It has a strategic plan at the moment that reflects the previous administration's priorities. We now have a new administration, and therefore a new strategic plan is needed. I haven't announced those priorities yet. That'll be next week. So this report basically says we are going to need a new strategic plan going into the future. There's a timetable in here about which includes engagement with residents, councillors, other stakeholders, officers, etc. We're going to include the biannual residence survey along with the budget consultation to look at the priorities and how that fits with the strategic plan. And we're also obviously going to be talking specifically with residents who are not digitally enabled, because we want to make sure we are as inclusive as we can be. There's going to be formal consultations from August onwards, and the new plan will formally go through overview and scrutiny, the PACs, the Cabinet, and onto Council in February, alongside a budget to show how we're going to pay for it all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any comments or questions from the committee? No? Okay, so the motion is page 132, 3.3, the corporate planning timetable, and the motion is that that be approved. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Last one, yay! Okay, item 17, medium-term financial strategy for 25-26 to 29-30. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Cox. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and make this a little bit more exciting, but there may be a fair bit of like what he just said going on here. So this is addressing the medium-term financial strategy. We have one already, but actually in light of the revised strategic plan that's under development, the MTFS needs to be developed in parallel. This report really addresses issues and risks in preparing the MTFS and sets out the proposed timetable, which actually, no surprise, is pretty similar, 99% similar to the one that affects the corporate planning timetable. In developing the MTFS, we have looked particularly at the focus on risk factors that may affect impact our delivery of the strategic priorities. The reason for doing that is the Council faces a number of risks, whether internal or external. So, for example, external may be the changes in central government, whether that be funding, it may be inflation, it may be other internal things, such as availability of staff, and we've considered a number of what those might be. On page 140, you'll see that we've broken out there may be 4 broad scenario outcomes. So scenario 1 is the most is favourable. Scenario 2 is more favourable, etc. With scenario 4 being the fourth, as in the least favourable. We're proposing that we actually come back on those scenarios in a fuller report with the MTFS, and we're going to be prepared for making following the most adverse scenario, scenario 4. Make plans for that accordingly, while positioning ourselves to take advantage of the more favourable, which is sort of standard risk management, especially when you've got a number of unknowns as we have right now. The report sets out key variables in future financial planning, so items that will take into account in that analysis: a rate of housing growth, council tax referendum limits, the rate of growth / decrease in business rates income. These are things outside of our control. rates of growth in decrease in other income, rate of growth decrease in cost of services, and then our ability to execute, as I mentioned. Phasing of costs and income may also fluctuate depending on what's in the new strategic plan. Right, so the next step will be the resident consultation linked with consultations on the strategic plan, the timetables in this paper, and then detailed work will be taking place during the autumn on the MTFS and the detailed budget proposals in line with the plan, with informal consultation coming back to the policy advisory committees and also back to committees with formal proposals in January. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. As with the previous report, I think it would be almost unfair to start finding holes and asking all sorts of questions. I think we're beginning a new curve. This council is beginning a different approach and a different curve, and I think it's so important that it's looked at carefully and in a balanced way. You just can't barge through it. Well, you could barge through it, but the consequences would be quite dire. So really, I think all we can do is, in all fairness, to say, yes, fine, let's keep it going until you are ready to do what you need to do. That's my personal view on this. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I just think that we steady the buffs until we know exactly where we're going. And you've got that in your mind, you know where you're going, but it's just a bit too soon to put it down yet. Well, that's fine. I'm happy to wait. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Cannon.
Perhaps the cabinet member could share what her view would be on future charges, or unless the leader would like to. I mean, will parking be frozen, or what would you like to see happen?
I think when we're approaching this, there's always going to be a number of things that are in the air. So we may walk in idealistically, using your example, saying let's freeze parking charges. But as and when different factors are known, we'll know hopefully very soon what's coming out of central government. And we look at the impact of those on cost lines and actually on the programme, the strategic plan that's being developed. There may have to be, and I'm absolutely sure there will have to be, some areas where we just have to tweak and accept that they are what they are. Until we do that work, until we've got more inputs, it's going to be done at pace over the next few weeks. It's the number one priority. Then we don't know exactly what those variables are going to be, but absolutely that's the approach we're taking.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, so the report makes following recommendations. So, on page 134, so number 1, note the issues and risks associated with updating the medium-term financial strategy. Is that agreed? Thank you. And number 2, approve the proposed approach and timetable, which is on page 148, for the development of an updated medium-term financial strategy for 2025-26 to 2029-30 and budget for 25-26. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So that's we've reached the end of our meeting. So thank you very much, everybody. I now declare this meeting closed.